Happy Wealth Wednesday, Nicole. So excited to have you here. Your path in this more non-traditional world of crypto and community building is so inspirational, and I'm excited to have you share your journey.
Thank you, and good morning. And happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'd love to kick us off and just get a little bit of an introduction about you and the work you've been doing over the past few years.
So currently I lead the accelerator for Seed Club. We are a DAO that support communities and creatives to launch and grow social tokens and DAOs themselves. I've been doing that for about 6 months. And prior to that, I was in academia and community organizations. Supporting artists has always been a thread in my life. So I've worked at Berklee College of Music and with the Open Music Initiative, and then in smaller nonprofits, working across artist-focused technology and supporting artists to use technology as an empowerment tool.
And do you remember what your first ever investment was or what got you started?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about that. I think that early on, and I don't even remember what platform I used at the time, but I remember, that sort of like advice around invest in something that you're interested in or something that you know about. And Garmin, which was MapQuest, pre-Google Maps. It was those devices that people would carry around and have in their cars and whatnot. For whatever reason, I remember learning about that and being like, that seems like something that is, going to serve a purpose and will probably grow. And so I remember buying just a little bit of that early on, maybe in college or something like that. And yeah, it was a good investment. I probably should have bought more. And then, I sold it. And I think it was just a good learning opportunity. I guess prior to that, like as a very, very young person, I have, low student debt. I can thank my grandmother who bought Bell stock. So anybody who's like super old like me remembers that there was Bell, which was the telephone company. And then they had to split because of antitrust law. And so there was all these baby bells like Verizon and, all of the various phone companies that we're now familiar with across the United States. And that was an excellent investment. So it wasn't my choice, but I was a very young owner of that. And it helped me get through college. I had sort of that fundamental knowledge, but I don't consider myself sort of an investor, a big I investor.
How and why did you get into your space? You started to touch on that briefly, this evolution of music and tech. How did you end up now, leading this accelerator?
Well, one of the things that I've definitely seen in my life is that I really live to support creatives and entrepreneurs through their journey. It's something that fuels me, and it just gives me immense pleasure to be able to support people through what can be a really challenging journey and to provide resources to incredible projects. It's such a privilege to get to do that. I came to crypto through the music industry. So the music industry is one of many where artists have been disenfranchised and sidelined, because of rent seekers and middlemen. And so crypto is very much a response to that. The disintermediation and allowing fans and artists to connect directly was what really called to me in Web3 and with Web3 technology. And so the ability for artists to take out those middlemen and capture the value that they're creating and then sharing that with their fan community, because often it is this sort of collaborative value creation between fan and artists. And so that taking of the platform out of the conversation then applies to many other industries where you're empowering whoever in that community is creating value to retain that for themselves rather than giving it up to Facebook or Instagram or Patreon or LinkedIn, et cetera, et cetera. There's no reason why those platforms need to benefit from our work.
What role do you feel like you're playing in the wealth space, and why is it important?
As I mentioned, investing was something that I was aware of, but I was very much called to community work. I love working with young people. I really prioritize working with marginalized communities. So it wasn't ever sort of like wealth and finance and investment never was something that was on my radar. And I've had to, the same way that I was very much self-taught in the music industry, I am now self-teaching sort of in the world of finance. And I think that in order to build better systems, you do have to understand the legacy systems that you're building. And so it's very much sort of a dual layered thing where like I'm doing that with myself and for myself, but then also working with others to do the same thing. Because I think a lot of the people that we're bringing to the table, we're bringing them to this table that in some ways is built on financial models and is built at least partially and perhaps majorly by people in finance. And so I think that, looking at bond curves and even understanding like what these concepts are, there's a lot of research and learning that you have to do if that's not something that was part of your basic education. And so I'm passionate about that for myself and knowing sort of the power and information asymmetries that exist and that exist to keep certain people up and others down. And so then I'm also passionate about breaking down those asymmetries, again, yes, for myself, but also sharing that transparency and being really public about the things that I know and how I'm learning them.
What do you think has been the most exciting thing that you've learned that you would want others to know?
Perhaps two things. I think one, which is that these systems are very much artifices. They're very much constructed. And while we can certainly rely on old models and sometimes they make sense, and when I say these systems, I guess I'm referring to economic systems. I think economic systems are artifices. They are constructed. And I think that one of the very interesting things about Web3 is that we're challenging those notions and we're starting to come up with new artifices and experimenting with new economic models. And so I think that that's been the biggest learning for me, is that sort of just pulling back the curtain and saying like, and that people are experimenting and playing with new models and, challenging models of inflation and supply. It took me a long time, like as a young person, to understand currency exchange and how currency rates are set, and really understanding. I was traveling to Mexico and understanding, okay, well, why are 10 pesos equal to $1? Like literally, I don't understand how that's set and who sets that and, who determines that. And so I think understanding that, again, these models are human created and that we can create new models and that we are, for me, is I think very empowering and exciting.
And in that, are there any examples of a person, a collective, or a company that's inspiring you in this space, and why?
I learn so much from what they go out and do. So Protein was a project that came through our second accelerator. I was actually in that accelerator myself as a participant with Ampled. And Protein really discusses good growth and is challenging sort of this aspect of, growth has to be exponential and it has to be accelerated and at sort of the pace of sort of legacy startup models. And so I appreciate how they are approaching the space and educating and bringing in their membership. So yeah, I certainly get a ton of inspiration from them. Like I've really appreciated what you're building at Eve Wealth. But I'm a fan of so many of the SEO3 projects as well, the third ones that came through our Seed Club cohort. I think that a lot of them are still a bit nascent, and in the next 6 to 12 months we're going to see them hitting the market and just really having tremendous success.
On that trend, like what advice would you give for somebody getting started, especially in a DAO, which feels like this very new concept for a lot of people?
Yeah, it can feel very much like you're trying to approach and enter a cloud or a blob or something like that, where you don't know where the door is and you also don't know if you've come through the door. I think sometimes people are in a DAO before they realize it. I think it's really important to find one that resonates with who you are. So, there truly is a DAO out there for everybody. And I think we're seeing that more and more as far as, come and look at Seed Club's materials, for example, and you'll see that there's DAOs and communities of all shapes and sizes and for everybody. So if you want to buy a basketball team, there's Kraus House. If you want to work in, with brands and in ad space, there's Jump. If you're into music, there's, so many, whether it's Tiny Mixtapes, which focuses on sort of the fan and music appreciation side. There's Water and Music, which focuses on music tech research. There's so many types, and there's, I think, like niches for every interest. And so I do think that that's really key, is finding one that calls to you, because ultimately that's what you're going to be excited to contribute. And so a big piece of being in a DAO is, getting your bearings, which can sometimes be challenging, but, not being afraid to step up and ask a question. I think one of the things that I really appreciate about Web3 currently is people's willingness to support and be friendly and be welcoming and, orient and educate people. And I think that that's very different than sort of this like winner takes all model that I think really was predominant in Web 2. I think there is this notion that we will be better the more people that we can come in, the more people that can onboard. And so pushing yourself a little bit outside of a boundary, not being afraid to ask a question, to introduce yourself. Very often the people who look like they know the most in the room have just been there for, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 more months than you have. So understanding that, and then, sharing, this is what I can do, this is what I can bring to the table, and finding that sort of first action. I think that DAOs very much are duocracies, meaning that they are ultimately led by the people who show up and contribute. So introduce yourself and roll up your sleeves and find a way to provide value.
And why would you want to join a
DAO? I think that, going back to what I was discussing before, I think that we're experimenting with new economic models. And to me, that's really exciting. I think we're also experimenting with new ways of getting things done. I won't pretend that it's always going to be this fluid. I think that as this space grows and matures, we will see systems like, human resources and legal entities and hierarchies, et cetera, coming more online. But right now, I think especially it is such a fluid space, and it's really a space to experiment. And so one of the things that I love about that is how quickly work can happen. Mm-hmm. And so especially like myself, having come out of nonprofits and academia, those are places with tremendous bureaucracy and legacy systems that make change and new ideas and new projects very difficult to put forward. Funding cycles are, years long as far as applying for a grant or getting something approved. And so the ability to have an idea and get some community traction, and then execute on it, is just so incredible to see in Web3, and I think is giving the space a ton of advantage as we sort of like roll out and bring to a little bit more mainstream market the various projects that we've been working on. So for me, I think that's the most fun part, is the fluidity and lack of friction in getting work done.
Is there anything else we should know? How can we keep in touch and follow what you're doing, what Seed Club's doing, and anything else that's coming up?
Yeah, sure. So I would say Discord and Twitter are where most Web3 people currently live their life 24/7. Seed Club is at Seed Club HQ on Twitter, and you'll find the Discord link there as well. And then I am my Bella Logica on Twitter, and then Nicole on Discord, in the Seed Club Discord. You can find me all the time. So yeah, I'm very accessible. DMs are open. Feel free to reach out and connect.
Amazing. And when is the deadline for the next Seed Club cohort?
Good question. December 20th. So it's coming up fast. We've got less than a week, and we are looking for all types of projects, very much looking for diverse projects led by women, led by LGBTQ+, led by Black, Indigenous, people of color. Come through. There's so much need. I'm going to just put a shout out there. I would love to see if there's communities out there working on like fertility and reproductive rights. In particular, it seems like such a critical element in our political sphere right now. And as far as like, real rent seekers and middlemen, that is the last place we want middlemen. So if you are working on, various technology and communities that empower women, DMs are super open. So come at me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nicole, for everything that you shared, and looking forward to keeping in touch.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to talk.